Our next speaker is Clare Trippett. Clare is Chief Technologist at CPI, which is one of the UK government's high-value manufacturing catapult centres. Clare has 15 years of experience in bioprocessing, biotech, and leading innovation. So I will bring Clare in now. And over to you, Clare.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, so hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Clare Trippett, and I'm a Chief Technologist at CPI, which is the Centre for Process Innovation. So following on from Bruce's excellent presentation on the trends and drivers behind alternative proteins, I'd like to talk to you today about the science behind cultivated meat, which along with plant-based and fermentation-based proteins is emerging as one of the key technologies in the alternative proteins sector. So I work for CPI, which is an innovation centre. I'm just going to spend just a couple of minutes introducing you to CPI and what we do. So CPI helps companies with developing, proving, scaling up, and ultimately commercializing new products and processes. So we're really here to try and help make sure every idea has the best chance of success. In doing this, we hope to achieve our vision of creating a healthier society, a cleaner environment, and a vibrant UK economy. And we do this by ensuring every great invention gets the best chance to become a successfully marketed product. So CPI we operate in the area in between research and invention and the commercial market. So we help with translating research into a commercial product or process. So we help with delivering, de-risking, and accelerating concepts into successful products. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the science behind cultivated meat and cover some of the challenges that the industry still faces if we're ever going to get cultivated meat to become mainstream. So as Bruce has covered, there's so many compelling reasons why we need to look at developing alternatives to animal proteins. There's obviously animal welfare issues, there's climate change, preventing future pandemics and antimicrobial resistance, and also ensuring that we have a sustainable food supply for the growing population. And advances in science and technology are offering us ever more sophisticated approaches for creating alternatives to animal proteins. Cultivated meat is one of the new kid on the alternative protein block. It's one of the newest technologies in our toolkit for alternative proteins. And what it offers us is a way of producing genuine animal meat without raising animals. So there's huge potential for innovation in cultivated meat, but there's still some significant scientific and engineering challenges that remain before the field can reach its full potential. So this quote, probably many of you in the audience have seen this quote. So the idea of cultivated meat isn't new. And back in 1931, Winston Churchill actually predicted that we'd move away from raising animals for food, when he said, "We shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat the breast or wing by growing these parts separately under a suitable medium." This sounds just like cultivated meat to me. But despite Churchill's early prediction, it wasn't until the noughties that scientists started to look at and test out growing animal cells. So in 2001, NASA investigated the potential of lab-grown meat as a way to feed astronauts during space travel. So NASA worked together with Touro College in New York, and they were able to successfully culture goldfish muscle and later on turkey cells. However, at the time, the cost was too high to implement into space travel. So cultivated meat's come a long way since the noughties, and in 2013, Professor Mark Post revealed the first cultivated meat burger on live TV, where it was cooked and tasted. So this burger took 3 months to create, and it cost around $330,000. So it was expensive, but amazing because it demonstrated that growing meat was scientifically possible. Fast forward 7 years later to December 2020, and we saw the first approval of a cultured meat product in Singapore. So this was a major kind of landmark for the cultivated meat industry. And a restaurant sold the first cultivated meat product for around $23. So obviously a big price reduction. And this was cultivated chicken meat by the California-based company Eat Just. So let's just reflect on that timeline for a second. The first cultivated burger in 2013 to a cultured meat product being eaten in a restaurant in 2020. It's not that long between those two events. So I think this gives us hope that cultivated meat could become mainstream in the not too distant future. So the cultured meat industry is kind of really expanding, and it's expanded a lot in recent years. And companies are starting to become more and more creative in their cultivated meat endeavours. There's interest even in cultivating meat from extinct animals. For example, in 2019, the synthetic biology company mammoth announced that they had secured $100 million of Series A funding to produce and scale cultivated meat from extinct species to create kind of novel and exotic food options, including things like mammoth steak. Mammoth also said that they were looking at developing dinosaur meat for which preserved DNA has been recovered. So some interesting and creative options for cultivated meat there. So what is cultivated meat? Well, it's also known as cultured meat, clean meat, cell-based or cellular meat. And cultivated meat is genuine animal meat produced through cell and tissue culture. So cultivated meat aims to be identical to conventional meat, right down to the cellular level. So it's made of the same animal cell types, such as muscle and fat and connective tissue. And these cells are arranged in a structure that replicate animal tissues, giving the meat the same sensory characteristics as conventional meat from an animal. So cultivated meat is meat. It's not synthetic meat or imitation meat. It's meat, but it just doesn't come from an animal. So this slide shows kind of a high-level overview of the cultivated meat production process. So the process starts with cells. So we need to isolate stem cells from an animal. So this can be from a live animal or from a recently slaughtered animal. And these stem cells are then used to create a cell bank from which future samples of cells can be taken. The cells are grown in a bioreactor. They're fed with growth media that gives them the nutrients they need to grow and expand. Depending on the product, there can be two stages with cultivated meat production. So the first stage is proliferation. This is where cells are grown and expanded to large numbers within a bioreactor. The second stage is called differentiation. So this is where cells receive signals from their environment and they're triggered to differentiate into specific cell types, such as muscle or fat or connective tissue. The final stage of the process is harvest. So the cells are harvested and they're formulated into food products. And then, of course, there's all the QC and safety testing as well that's required. So this is a kind of overview of the production process, but this needs to be done in a cost-effective way. Otherwise, it's never going to be commercially viable and it would remain as a kind of niche product. So there's dozens of cultivated meat companies around the world now, which is really exciting. But to my knowledge, none of them have produced cultivated meat at scale. And there's still some major challenges that we need to overcome in the industry to industrialize cultivated meat. So there's the availability of cell lines, so cell lines from different species of animals. There's the cost and the performance of cell culture media. There's optimizing the bioprocess and scaling this up. And then there's producing structured and complex cuts of meat. So this is cuts of meat that mimic and replicate meat from an animal kind of to a high level. Okay, so cell line availability. So as we've mentioned, the process starts with cells, and access to cell lines for cultivated meat production is still one of the major barriers to advancing research in this area. One of the really exciting things about this technology is that it gives us the chance to grow cells from a wide range of species, but there's a real need to increase the availability of cell lines from animals, including livestock and poultry and sea life. Plus, we also need to identify cell types that are going to be suitable for large-scale manufacturing, because these cells need to grow and thrive in the manufacturing process. One of the challenges is that cell line development is resource and time intensive. It takes quite a long time to develop and fully characterize a cell line. And there are opportunities for cell line engineering, of course, subject to regulations. And there's also opportunities for cell adaptation, so we can get the cells to adapt to growing in a different environment. So growth media. So this is a really important part of cultivated meat production. So growth media or cell culture media is used to feed the cells with the nutrients they need to grow. And it's currently one of the major costs of scaling up cultivated meat production. So there's two main components to growth media. There's the basal media, which provides essential nutrients like amino acids and glucose. And then there's growth factors, and these are proteins that stimulate cell growth and proliferation. Many types of media still contain something called fetal bovine serum, which contains growth factors, hormones, and other molecules. And fetal bovine serum it's exactly what it sounds like. It's harvested from bovine fetuses from slaughtered cows. So it's clearly misaligned with the ethics around cultivated meat. And also it's super expensive, so it's not economically viable for large-scale cultivated meat production. Growth factors for media can be expensive. Large-scale recombinant production of these growth factors is an option to bring down costs. We should also consider media recycling as well to get as much use as possible out of the media, and also help to develop a sustainable manufacturing process with a low environmental footprint. And also we should look into alternative sources of ingredients to ensure environmental sustainability, and there is research going on in this area. I think one of the interesting things about growth media for cultivated meat is that it will help to accelerate innovation in growth media that's relevant for other industries as well, such as the biopharma industry. So the biopharma industry hasn't faced the same cost pressures as the food industry because biopharmaceuticals are such a high value product. But maybe we can take the learning from developing growth media for the cultured meat industry and apply this to the biopharma industry. And that can help to drive down the costs of these kind of life-changing therapeutics. Okay, so bioprocess optimization and scale up. So the manufacturing process for cultivated meat, it must be scalable and cost efficient. So cost and scale are the two major drivers here. Cultivated meat products can be unstructured, so they can be kind of a mincemeat type product, or they can be structured cuts of meat, which are a bit more complex to develop. The process and scaling will likely look different depending on which product is being made, kind of especially in the later stages of the process. But bioprocess optimization can help and help to bring down production costs. So stages of bioprocess optimization and scale up include kind of a high throughput screening stage to look at lots of different growth conditions and identify optimal cell culture and differentiation conditions. So in this stage, we can screen different media types, we can screen different cell culture conditions such as pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen concentration. And once we're happy that we've found the optimal cell culture conditions, we can then scale that up to lab scale demonstration to test the robustness of the process. This can be something kind of like maybe a 10-litre scale. Once we're happy with that we've got a robust and reproducible process, we can go on to scale that up to pilot scale. So this is maybe perhaps at 50 litres scale. And then after that, we can scale up to commercial scale production. Technologies such as continuous processing may be really helpful to increase the efficiency of the manufacturing process. So this is where the unit operations are kind of linked together and run continuously. And there are companies researching this possibility. Bioreactor design. So bioreactor design links closely with bioprocess optimization. And one of the problems we've got in the industry is that current bioreactor models are not optimized for culturing meat. So we're trying to work with bioreactors that weren't designed with culturing meat in mind. Bioreactors are required for large-scale production of cultivated meat, and they house the cells during growth and differentiation. And there's different types of bioreactor, including stirred tank reactors, rocking or wave bag reactors, airlift or perfusion reactors, and each of them has their own kind of advantages and drawbacks. For example, stirred tank reactors are a staple technology in the biopharma and biotechnology industries. They're a great scalable technology. They're a bit easier to harvest material from than some other bioreactors, but there's a potential risk of shear stress on the cells. So bioreactor design for cultivated meat is a huge white space area, and there's a lot of innovation opportunities here in bioreactor design that can address the challenges at the different stages of the process, especially kind of the tissue formation stage of the process. There are tools that can help us, so computational modeling techniques such as computational flow dynamics can support the design and virtual prototyping of reactors, so that's a really valuable tool. And there's also opportunities for us to incorporate elements of smart bioprocessing. So we can incorporate machine learning and advanced process control to help with automating the process, and also developing a self-regulating process so that we can keep the cells in kind of the optimal state. Okay, so we talked about how cultivated meat can be either unstructured or structured. And producing complex and structured cuts of meat is one of the ultimate goals of the cultivated meat industry. It's kind of one of the holy grails of the industry, but it's still a major challenge at the moment. Scaffolds are a key technology in helping to develop structured cuts of meat. So scaffolds provide a support for cells to adhere to, where they can differentiate and mature. The scaffold needs to allow media penetration so that nutrients and oxygen can get to the cells. So things like the porosity of the scaffold are quite important. And the scaffold also needs to have material properties that are compatible with the cells. So it needs to be biocompatible. Together with the cell culture media, the scaffold can help to influence how the cells differentiate. So the cells will receive signals from the media and from the scaffold, and this can determine the pathway the cells take for differentiation. Scaffolds can be biodegradable or edible. They can be derived from biological sources or sourced through recombinant protein expression, and they can be assembled using technologies such as 3D printing. More research is needed really to discover the best scaffolding materials for cultivated meat products, and definitely further research is needed around incorporating scaffolds into bioreactors, so ultimately we can develop a scalable manufacturing process for structured cuts of meat. As well as scaffolds, there's some other interesting technologies for developing structured cuts of meat. So there's 3D bioprinting, and this offers us a solution for producing 3D cuts of meat. It's scalable, it's highly reproducible, and it can precisely control the amount of muscle and fat present. And there's also a lot of interesting research going on around self-assembling cell sheets. So this is around stacking or folding thin sheets of cultivated muscle and fat cells, which are then merged together to create a slab of meat. Some of the advantages of this approach include that we can tune the nutritional content, so we can control how much fat and muscle is present in the meat, and also it's amenable to scaling. So there's some universities working on research in this area, for example, Newcastle University and also McMaster University. Okay, so this is the last slide for me. So this has been a really high-level overview of cultivated meat and some of the challenges that the industry faces before it can become mainstream. It's an incredibly exciting technology with the potential to disrupt the way we produce meat. And I'd like to finish with a thought on how cultivated meat technology can help us far, far into the future. Cultivated meat technology is exciting because it can be used in environmental conditions where raising livestock is difficult or impossible. For example, it could be used in extreme climates or during space travel. And as concerns about our future on Earth grow and the interest in colonizing other planets such as Mars is gaining momentum, so we've seen in the media recently about the Mars rover landing, and also Elon Musk's efforts to make the first steps towards colonizing Mars. But given the environmental differences between these two planets, between Earth and Mars, traditional animal agriculture probably wouldn't be possible. So meat would be in scarce supply or not available at all. But maybe in the future, cultivated meat could be a tool to help us with this, and maybe it could be a tool to become interplanetary in the future. I certainly think it could be possible. But I guess before we start to think about culturing meat on Mars, we've got some challenges to solve on Earth, first of all. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and thank you so much to Master Investor for inviting me to speak at the event.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Again, we've got lots of questions. I'm hoping we can perhaps just squeeze in a couple, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
We've had quite a few questions around the growth media side of things. So I'll just read this one out to begin with. Obviously, fetal bovine serum isn't viable and is extracted through a horrendous process. Some companies have said they're using non-animal media. Is this true, and why aren't all companies using it?
It's true, it is true. There are companies in the cultivated meat space that have developed, said that they've developed animal-free media. So I think that's showing a shift towards animal-free media. Animal-free media is available as well in the biopharma industry. It's still very expensive, and it's kind of proprietary as well, so we don't necessarily know exactly what's in it. But it's true, animal-free media does exist. But I think one of the major challenges really with the growth media is that we need to bring the cost down. So we need to bring the cost that's still kind of at a pharmaceutical level, but we need to bring it down to the food grade level.
Great, that was the easy question. Now for the harder one. $64 million question, really, or $64 billion question. When will the first cell-based meat or fish be available in supermarkets, and in which countries? Just to put you on the spot a bit there.
Okay, obviously nobody has the answer to this really. If I was to guess, I'd say in between 5 or 10 years, but nearer to 5. That would be my guess. And in terms of which country, gosh, I don't know. There's so much innovative research at the moment, isn't there? There's obviously Singapore's had the first approval. There's so much innovative, exciting research going on in Israel, and obviously the States as well. So yeah, I'm not sure, but if I had to guess when the first cultured meat products would be available to buy, 5 years. My money's on 5 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Claire.